Well, first of all, there you go. So what you're at today is a DC Oral History Coffee Chats. And the DC Oral History Collaborative is one of our programs where we work with people across the city so that citizens like you, like Paul, can learn oral history techniques and collect narratives around DC. And we collect those stories, and a lot of times we put them into the People's Archive at MLK so that everyone else for the future of the library has access to these stories. So today we're really talking about Penn Branch stories. I'm really excited about that and excited to see Paul's work. If you're ever interested in doing oral history work yourself, you're more than welcome to reach out to us. We have grants that we provide every year, and we put together opportunities like this with partners and with grantees. So I'd like to introduce Paul, if that's good. I'm going to read the bio. So this morning our conversation is being moderated by Paul V. Grant, Mr. Paul right here, nationally recognized. Yes, yes. Yeah. Nationally recognized independent filmmaker and motion designer, and a resident of this community. I think y'all already know that because it seems like everyone knows Paul.
Friends out
there. Paul led a project that explored the Penn Branch neighborhood in Southeast DC through the personal narratives of the first generation of African Americans who integrated Penn Branch between 1960 and 1968. The goal was to share one generation's experience with the newer residents while providing an opportunity to build deeper understanding of how local policies, systems, and environment have continued to impact the quality of life in this neighborhood over the past 60 years. We're incredibly grateful to have you, Paul, and the rest of the panel joining us today. And I'm going to let you take it away. Just one more thing to let you know, we'll be taking photographs. If for some reason you would rather not have your photograph, just let us know at the end and we'll make note of that. And the photographs are just for us to be able to promote these events moving forward. Thank you very much.
Gotta learn how to work this thing. Hello? Right. Oh, look at that. No. Right. Hold. Light comes on. Testing. There's Paul. Good morning, friends and neighbors. How are you all?
Good morning.
Wonderful to see everyone. Welcome to Penn Branch Community Day. This is how we're going to kick it off. Sorry we started a little late, but it's going to be good. I just want to say the We Are Penn Branch project actually started maybe 5 years ago. It started with a conversation with myself, and I don't know if you all know former neighbor Daryl Baker.
Yes.
And we talked about it for a long time, and finally we got up the nerve and said we were just going to do it. And it began with an interview back in 2015 that we did, and you're going to see some of those clips here. And then it went. Then I got busy. Life happened. We all got busy. Actually, Daryl left the neighborhood, and from there, a few years went by. And it later became a conversation that I picked up with Kyle Murphy. And Tracy and I talked with Kyle, and Kyle became a cheerleader for it and kind of pushed us to, hey, we got to do this. And we recommitted to it. And so I also want to do two things before we get started, is acknowledge my co-director and wife and business partner, Tracy Grant.
Yeah.
And I also want to say that this session will be dedicated to the memory of our neighbor, Dr. James Baldwin. He was a World War II veteran. He lived right over here on Polk. He passed away on August 1st. You will see clips of his interview. And so we'd like to dedicate this session and this presentation to him. He was also the first African-American president, first president of the Civic Association. So we want to dedicate this session to him. And so we're going to just scroll through a few slides real quickly before we jump into the presentation. And I even have an image here that I found on, if you all want to read an awesome website, Dr. Baldwin's life story has been documented very well on blackliberators.net, and it is a website that was created by the Netherlands. He was a member of the 784th All-Black Tank Battalion. In World War II. They liberated the Netherlands, and the Netherlands honored him in 2016 or 17. And you can actually find that article in the Washington Post where they gave him an award. And all of the surviving members of that tank battalion, which includes Jackie Robinson, by the way, the great baseball player, their stories are there on Black Liberators, I think .nl or .net. So please check out that website. It's really awesome. They did a great job. But this is an early picture of him, and this is a picture of him most recently. Just that slide. And he passed July 1924 to August just last week. So moving on from there, I want to share a few images of our neighborhood. This is the Derby race in 1946. These images were found by our neighbor Susan Hormuth, and she shared these with me, and I want to share them with you. And so you can see here, this is our lovely Pennsylvania Avenue in 1946, and I'm sorry you ladies can't see, but you can kind of see there. Okay. And we can just scroll through those, and we have 3 images of Pennsylvania Avenue in the 1940s, and we can see, get a taste of how the neighborhood looked at that point in time. And there we are, there are kids on the, heading down the hill. That looks like fun. Then here's an image of the Hot Shop, the Mighty Mo's. For those who don't know, there was a Marriott-owned Mighty Mo's restaurant over in Penn Branch, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So there's an early advertisement for that. And then some images of our lovely and wonderful panelists. Miss Patricia Quander Hall, Miss Barbara D. Morgan, and I'm sorry, I used to always say Barbara A. Morgan, and please forgive me. And Miss Anita Hammond, who couldn't join us today because she's in, but she will hopefully be joining us soon. Vildred Fitzgerald. These are our narrators who participated in the Oral History Project. Yvette and Diane Alexander, her mother. Baxter and Judy G. And the wonderful Susan Hormuth. And then images of the neighborhood, different times of the year. So I'm going to jump right into the presentation so we can start watching some clips and talking to our panelists and sharing some history. Just pull up. Okay, so let's just scroll through there. Let's go to.
Paul, you lost your signal.
Hello?
You lost your.
Uh-oh, we lost our signal.
I think it's just the cord.
The cord got pulled.
There you go.
There we go.
What's that? Okay, what is oral history? I just want to clarify really quickly. Look, oral history is not a documentary. It really is just getting the personal narratives of people who participated in history. We wanted the personal stories of those who lived in this neighborhood. And you can go to the next one. I'm just going to blow through some of these. It is a way that culture and values are shared to strengthen the community and inform new generations over time. It is an interdisciplinary, interview-based method of producing historical documents for future generations to better understand the lived experience of history and the many, many meanings that can be pulled from those experiences. So let's go to the next one. The scope of this project, as we designed it initially, was to focus on the first generation of African Americans to integrate Penn Branch between 1950 and 1968. Here's what's interesting about this story and interesting about Penn Branch. You can go back to that last slide. You know, much is talked about with gentrification in the city, but Penn Branch has a unique story in that Penn Branch begins as an enclave that's all white, and then it is integrated by middle-class African Americans. And to me, that was a very unique take on that story. I'd never heard of that before. It's almost like we reversed it in some ways, and then it becomes a predominantly black community for a period of years. So one of the things, so when we started this project, we had no idea that we had any members of the community who were still a part of the original families that had lived here. And that was one of the biggest surprises that we found as we were doing this project. So let's move forward. One of the themes that we wanted to explore, we wanted to sort of really examine and compare social, economic, and environmental changes and how that's looked at and experienced across multiple generations, demographic shifts, and all the changes that a neighborhood goes through. What we call neighborhood equity, and that's like, how does the value of a community change across time, or does it remain the same? My theory is, personally, Penn Branch has remained solid. Let's go to the next one. So our first interview, again, was shot September 2015. We did get an interview with Miss Patricia Green in 2015 before she left and retired to Colorado. She was a longtime resident. And the project received a grant from Humanities DC, where we conducted phase 1 of this between March and December of 2021. And we conducted 12 interviews, which was a lot. Our narrators, again, Patricia Green, Patricia Q. Hall, who's right next to me, Miss Barbara D. Morgan, Anita Hammond, James W. Baldwin, Mildred Fitzgerald, Diane and Yvette Alexander, Susan Hormuth, Patricia Q. Hall, she's there twice, and then Baxter and Judith G. So here's the first clip I want to share.
Yeah, I told you about the story about moving, looking at different houses with that. You can talk. You remember any details?
Well, when my husband came, he made a circle on the map and said, I will live within this area because I do not want to commute. So this had a lovely house. It had a yard. It had a fence so that the dog could stay in. And that's why we bought this house here.
My husband had an aunt who was living in Chicago. She wanted to get out of Chicago and she wanted to go back to Lynchburg. Bert was in real estate and we were about to move anyway. So she bought this house with the idea that we were going to buy it when she got her house built in Lynchburg.
Well, we were just looking for a larger home and a different type of neighborhood. We just happened to turn off of Pennsylvania Avenue one day and found out all this was back here. And so we said, wow, just look here. So we happened to see that this house was for sale.
Looked at houses in Maryland, D.C., all over D.C. We lived in Mayfair Mansions. Back then, Mayfair was nice. It was really nice, not the drama that's over there now. And we would ride around, my mother and myself, Gigi. We would ride around every so many days out of a week looking for houses. And we just came around here and saw this one.
I was born in Brooklyn. My parents were both from New York. My father got a job with the government. In 1956, he took a job with Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. So they moved to Naylor Gardens, and they were there for about 2 years. By that time, there was a family of 3 kids and they were looking to buy a house. So they bought a house on 33rd Place, which is now literally down the block and around the corner from where I am now.
My husband wanted to live in the suburban area. I wanted to live in the urban area. But when we saw Hillcrest, we said this is it because it's suburban, and urban.
Well, this neighborhood number one was better meaning that you had the houses.
The house that we were living in was an old house. It was a nice house, but it was old, and we were looking for something that was not a row house.
At that time, they had the Seafarers Club, which a lot of the black guys were buying boats. And so we were sitting, and I was still living on G Street Northeast. And so we were sitting there, and so he said that decided he was going to buy a boat. And I looked at him. I said, "You're going to buy a boat?" And so I got up, took my baby, and went upstairs. He came upstairs. And so I told him, I said, "If you buy a boat, that's the end of our marriage." And I said, "You better get a house." We went to Mr. McNeil. That was his son, McNeil Realty. That was it. We met Mr. McNeil, and I'll never forget. We went to his office over by where the $5 movie theater is. We were getting ready. Towards the end, we were getting ready to put down the deposit. We had to put down a deposit. And he told us, "No,
I'm like, what? Because we thought, wait, something's wrong or what? He said, no, you're a veteran. And he said, don't you dare pass that up. So he told us to please take out, see if you can't go your VA. And that's exactly how we got the house. We got the house, it cost $39,950. Our house note was. People wondered how we could afford it. The house note was $216 a month.
All right. Now, our panelists. First question. Who enjoyed the house more? By the way, I just want to say, you all didn't hear, but Barbara D. Morgan just said up here, she says, and I meant that too. But I want to know who enjoyed the house more, ladies, you or your spouse?
I think my spouse did, because what happened, and let me say this, Pat's husband was my best man when we got married. They had a real estate company together. But I used to come through here. My husband was a realtor also. And we used to come through and go down Branch Avenue. At that particular time, there was only one way going south and one way coming north. There was a two-way until they built the expressway. And so I said to him one day, I said, this is a nice neighborhood, because where I lived, I moved, and I lived on G Street Northeast. And then before that, I lived up in the Soldiers Home area, which was a very nice community. So when one time I almost ended up in Columbia, Maryland, but I'm a person, I have never liked snow. And when I went to Columbia, I saw the moon shining on the ice, and I said, that's not for me. Plus, we were just getting married, and he said, well, you'll have to be out here with the children, because I'll have to commute into D.C. Well, he didn't know that was out of the picture. So then when I told him that when he was getting ready to buy this boat, and I said to him, you don't have a roof over your daughter's head, because my parents had bought a home which was on 3rd Street Northwest, which was the old Soldiers Home. So we started looking, and that's when we came in, and we were the second owners of the house that I am now living in, which is 3245. That house was owned by Mr. Bowman, who was, I think, with DCRA. And of course, there was no Penn Branch. When I moved in, it was a used car lot. There was no banks or anything.
Now you're referring to the shopping center.
Yes. And the area was called DuPont Park.
We're going to get into that. I want you to stick a pin in that.
Okay. So what I did, I saw a transition in the community. When we moved in,
we're going to get into that.
Okay.
That's coming up next. But I want Ms. Hall to answer the question as well about who enjoyed it more, you or your husband? What do you think? That's coming up next.
I believe that both of us enjoyed this house very much.
Okay. Did he like?
But there was no. We were both amenable to being here.
Okay.
In the beginning, so it was no problem.
Okay. Excellent. Tell us quickly your favorite story about having lived in the community, or when you first moved in. Because there had to be some very happy moments when you first moved in. You're coming to that. Stick a pin in that. But I mean, you're a young couple. You got a larger house. Did it meet your expectations?
Sir?
Okay.
It met my expectations. My neighbors were really very nice. I enjoyed. Beg your pardon? Oh, I enjoyed the area, and as it turns out, my daughter was already in school in this area, so there was no adjustment over what not to be worried about. And my son went to the other school in this area at the time. So
We'll talk about that too.
okay,
So where were you ladies? Where are your families? Where are you ladies from?
I'm a native Washingtonian.
Okay.
I'm a native Washingtonian.
She had to put that on the mic.
How many generations?
I'm the first generation. My parents are originally from North Carolina, but they were educators.
Educators at what level?
Oh, I have a story that I had the Washington Afro to write about my family, and it was traced back to 1800. My uncle graduated from A&T, which is Aggie, in the 1930s. So we have always been very active when it came to movements and education. And I'd like to put in a plug in for my daughter who's not here. And that is that she sits on the alumni board now of Spelman College.
Wonderful, long history of education.
And tell them about your son, Morehouse guy. I am a third generation Washingtonian. Both of my parents were teachers. One an elementary school teacher. My father taught at the Industrial Home School for Boys. My son is a Morehouse man. He is a dentist.
I understand he lives nearby.
Yes, he does.
Can you tell us where he lives? Does he live? What's the name of that neighborhood?
He is a member of the Penn Branch neighborhood as well. My daughter lives in Prince George's County. She works for the federal government.
Now, before we move on to I'm sorry, did I cut you off? Is there something else you wanted to say?
I've also got a great grandson.
What is his name?
His name is Beckham.
And when was his first visit to Penn Branch?
His first visit to Penn Branch was he was born in Washington. His mother came to Washington for Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago. He was not due until February. She never made it to the Thanksgiving dinner. She had the baby. He was in the hospital here for several weeks because he was only 3 pounds. He is now 2 years old, still tiny, but heavy and so busy. He wears me out. But he has been here in Penn Branch visiting.
Now, I want to share one more thing before we move forward about Miss Patricia Hall. She is my next door neighbor for the past 10 years. I've been here, Tracy and I have been here since 2012. And for 10 years, she has called our home. I've had the great honor of talking with her many times on many occasions. And I noticed and didn't notice that her middle name was Q, Patricia Q Hall. Tracy and I do a lot of work in the museum world, and we've had the pleasure of working with the Quander family. And for those who don't know, the Quander family is the oldest documented African-American family in American history because they served George Washington. Patricia Quander Hall, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow.
I had no idea. It just, until we did this project, it never occurred to me to ask what the Q stood for.
Oh.
So what's it like?
said, I'm a native Washingtonian, a third generation Washingtonian. We do have family meetings and whatnot.
Lots of historians there.
Wanders United. I believe you might know Rohuleman.
I have interviewed him in a forum.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Great man.
He is a distant cousin.
District Circuit Court judge, I believe.
Yes.
Might have been the first, in fact. First African American judge, circuit court judge. Can't remember, but
I don't know.
okay.
Okay.
But also, he is also a historian, and he also documents the Quander, his family.
Now, you know, you did not tell me that I was going to have to speak here.
I apologize. But we can move right along.
Please.
No pressure.
There is a room. I am a member of St. Benedict the Moore Catholic Church. My father had worked in the church quite a bit and whatnot. And in fact, they used to call him Father Hall. I mean, Father Quantum. Excuse me. There's a room over there at that church, the Charles Quantum room, and it was named for my father.
Wow.
And I'm very proud of that too.
Thank you for sharing that.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, the Quander family history goes back over 400 years. It is an amazing story.
Wow.
Okay, so now we're going to move on into becoming Penn Branch. So before we don't go forward here, I'm going to read something here. This is a part of becoming Penn Branch. This is something that is found in the deed of many of the houses on this street. And as beautiful as the neighborhood is, there's an ugly side to the history. And it says here in the deed, which is also in the deed to my property, that neither the above described land or any part of shall ever be sold, leased, transferred, demised, or conveyed, either directly or indirectly, to any Negro or any person of Negro or African descent, nor shall any home erected thereupon be occupied or used by any person of Negro blood, excepting as to servants or the owner or occupant of said land. And also no spirituous or malt liquors or intoxicating beverages of any kind shall ever be sold or kept for sale on the said land and premises.
Wow.
And I'm going to pass this around. This belongs to Chris Morgan, but it is also still in my deed. And you all can take a look at this.
It's in all of the deeds of the Black Americans who fought in this community.
Wow.
It's in mine, and I came here in 1962. And it's in all of our deeds.
Okay, so this is how we become Penn Branch. Okay, go to the next one. This is the next video.
Real estate calls this entire area Hillcrest. We thought the entire neighborhood was Hillcrest, and then you get here and they said, well, no, we're Penn Branch and it's Hillcrest. How did that all come about? Or was it always like that?
When we came, this particular area was known as Fort Davis because of evidently one of the forts is up the street is Fort Davis. You have Fort Reno, you have Fort Davis, you have Fort Stanton, a ring of forts around town, and this was known as Fort Davis. And it wasn't until my husband and his friends decided that they really didn't want to be known as Fort Davis because they didn't necessarily approve of it philosophically, that they set up Penn Branch. And then that's how it became Penn Branch in about 65, I'd say.
What was the philosophical, you'll answer to Darryl, what was the philosophical
It was
idea?
a very, I don't know how to put this nicely. It was a group that wasn't broad-minded, let's put it like that, and didn't want newcomers if it wasn't their persuasion.
So Penn Branch developed out of that.
It was a revolt.
At first, Penn Branch Civic Association didn't want black folks in it. They would have their meetings, but we were not allowed to be a part of it
I know you had a black one and a white, civic and citizen. That was just all over the city that way. White was citizen, black was civic, irrespective of, wherever you live. See, it wasn't too long before they got together. Uh, I think I'm almost sure. I think I was the first president.
What were your priorities when you were president of the Civic Association?
I don't think I ever just looked at priorities. You're president, you have a general. But we had, I'd been active in the in the Civic Association before I moved out this way. And we did a little project. But we had committees, and whatever committee come back on the floor and you vote, But it was just something that gave me a chance to be involved in the community, try to keep things clean and such, and that, that type of thing.
Right.
But well, now naturally we didn't know what the Citizens Association was doing or what kind of agenda they had.
DuPont Park and Penn Branch, some of their areas overlap, and that's the reason why. So we had some of the folk who lived at the top of the hill and so forth and down here who became members, and what happened was Haskell Shackelford, who was a mailman, lived on Mass Avenue, went to DuPont, Fort DuPont, and asked them to give us this area. So they gave us from the railroad track all the way up to the other side where the park is, where you come through. All of that became, and all the way over to Eli, became DuPont Park. This whole area was DuPont Park.
Up until 65, it was pretty united. I mean, it wasn't very broad in scope. After 65, if you didn't like what we were doing, well, you didn't have to join, but most people chose if they wanted to. If they didn't want to join, usually they left.
Because some of the white families began to move out, one by one, but there were some who stayed, and those who stayed welcomed us and into the neighborhood and were very, very friendly.
Long guess. I would say probably to 80 to 68, probably about 20 to 30% of the neighborhood was African American. And after that, it became, after 68, I would say it became 60 to 70% African American.
I would bet you by 1970, it was definitely all black. Boy, so you can take that to the bank.
Okay, so one of the things, I am new to the practice of oral history. So one of the things that I have learned in this process is that oral history is subjective. It is not our responsibility to correct the narrator if they make a mistake in a fact. And so one of the things that's still not clear to me, the first question that I have for you ladies, and anyone else that may be able to answer, is was it Fort Davis or Fort DuPont first? Was all of this Fort Davis and Fort DuPont before the revolt that Ms. Green describes?
It was Fort DuPont, and that's when Haskell Shackelford, as I said, went to Fort DuPont, and that's when they gave us this area.
No, I'm sorry, when you say they, who is they?
That was the Fort DuPont area, which was back over off of in Southeast. Really back off of what is that? Going back like B Street, all back over in that area, which is that's how we got. Because see, what happened was, like it was stated by Mr. Baldwin, we could not go to the civic meetings. So
The citizens.
The citizens. Because what they did was, when we decided that we were going to join, Southeast Neighbors was what was here really. And they would have their meetings in their homes. So then what happened, Stewart's Funeral Home allowed us to have our meetings there. That was this was our civic association.
So it was called Southeast Neighbors.
Yes, that was a group originally that was controlling all of this area.
Okay.
Now, and then what happened, like I said, and then we went from there to the Adventist Church. And from the Adventist Church on Mass Avenue, we went to Central, which is now in Maryland. And that's where we held our meetings. And like I said, in that time, we went from there and we went to Pennsylvania Avenue Baptist. But the minister at Central Baptist, when he sold it, he told the people that bought the church, where the mosque is, that we could stay there. But a lot of our people was not into that religion, so they didn't want to meet there. So that's when we went to Pennsylvania Avenue. But we are documented also about the history of what civic is. And we go back to some of the commissioners in the District of Columbia when they had them. There were presidents of the Federation of Civic Associations. We had Duncan, who was there. We also had Ben Alexander, who was the president of the UDC, the university. We've had some very notable blacks that have served as presidents of the Federation. As a matter of fact, this year, we celebrated 100 years, and I was able to serve twice as the citywide president of the DC Federation of Civic Associations.
I know you've had a long history of advocacy, and also, I don't remember if I asked you this, but I know for you, Ms. Hall, you did attend the March on Washington. I remember you talking about that during the interview. One of the questions that I have that I failed to ask during our formal interviews with both of you was, that had to have been a very sort of heady, optimistic time. Here you have the civil rights movement happening, and then it's sort of playing out here in this community as well. So can you ladies both talk about what it felt like at that time, what it was feeling like? Like, were you optimistic coming into this? Were you disappointed? Disgusted? I mean, what, here between 65 and 68 in Penn Branch, it sounds like there was a lot of transition.
There was. As a matter of fact, I had my second child in '64, so I was home basically, and I remember the assassination of our civil rights leader, MLK.
68 April.
Yes, because my birthday's in April, and that's when he was assassinated. But I took a part in a lot of the things that took place, not only in the district, but also around the country. I was fortunate enough to be a representative for the District of Columbia for the Democratic National Committee. And I was on the Stanford Committee, he was the president of Duke University. And we became very, very close. And we wrote the charter for the Democratic Party of the United States.
And what year was this?
1960. You're going back in the years now. You can tell my age in a minute. But
I was being impolite.
yes. But we wrote the charter, and the second Congressional Black Caucus, when they had their Black Caucus dinner, I have a plaque that they gave us, and I have a picture in my house with Shirley Chisholm, Andy Young, Charlie Rangel, that I took with them when they awarded us that plaque, and that was the second Congressional Black Caucus.
Okay. I want to ask Ms. Hall, how can you talk some about that period for you coming into Penn Branch, and your thoughts on that period?
You started off talking about the March on Washington.
Yes.
Okay. I can recall that.
recall that there was a group of us who joined the March on Washington and were walking down there on the mall to hear Martin Luther King speak and whatnot. And it was really a very joyous occasion. We were really anxious for better jobs, etc., and whatnot. But Martin Luther King was just a very inspiring speaker and whatnot. And not only were we there, but we carried our children. They were also a part of this.
Okay. Moving on. One of the things that we want this project to do as it progresses, we hope to really get a comparison about the differences and how what your generation experienced and the challenges of living in the community. I would imagine even no matter what the community is, there's going to be some challenge. Social, political, economic, life is hard. But and also how those challenges would face the current generation who are just coming into the community. And we'd love to get a comparison and contrast. So if we were doing this project long term, it would be your generation, the generation that came immediately thereafter, probably 70s through 80s, and then talking to those who are just moving into the community in the last 2 years and understanding how, just what they all were going through. And so I'm going to play a clip because one of the big surprises with this story that we found in this session of interview was Susan Horman. Susan, we knew you. I worked with you and cleaned parks with you for 10 years down and didn't realize you had grown up here. So one of the questions that we asked were, what were the challenges that your generation faced? And when I asked everybody that, one of the biggest things that came back was something that I also hear in the current generation that's just coming in. And that's talking about education and the schools. And so this next clip gets a little bit into that. And as we move into living in Penn Branch. So let's play this one. Is what were your concerns, you and your husband, as a young couple with kids? I mean, what concerned you most as a resident of Penn Branch about the area, raising a family?
We really had very few concerns. Really did. Now the schools were beginning to change over.
In what way?
Well, in terms of, some of the middle-class parents were moving their children to private schools.
Before I got here, see, they were in Catholic schools.
But why did you choose Catholic school?
Because I didn't, I thought that was the best education at the time. I didn't trust the public school system. And another thing, I guess was a factor of me being brought up in a segregated. At the time, our system was Division I and Division II. So I was brought up in Division II, but I got an education. And when integration came about, the schools, I just felt that some of the teachers that
would face the current generation who are just coming into the community. And we'd love to get a comparison and contrast. So if we were doing this project long term, it would be your generation, the generation that came immediately thereafter, probably 70s through 80s, and then talking to those who are just moving into the community in the last 2 years and understanding how, just what they all were going through. And so I'm going to play a clip because one of the big surprises with this story that we found in this session of interview was Susan Horman. Susan, we knew you. I worked with you and cleaned parks with you for 10 years down and didn't realize you had grown up here. So one of the questions that we asked were, what were the challenges that your generation faced? And when I asked everybody that, one of the biggest things that came back was something that I also hear in the current generation that's just coming in. And that's talking about education and the schools. And so this next clip gets a little bit into that. husband, as a young couple with kids, I mean, what concerned you most as a resident of Penn Branch about the area, raising a family?
We really had very few concerns. Really did. Now the schools were beginning to change over. Well, in terms of, some of the middle class parents were moving their children to private schools.
Before I got here, see, they were in Catholic schools.
But why did you choose Catholic schools?
Because I didn't, I thought that was the best education at the time. I didn't trust the public school system. And another thing, I guess was a factor of me being brought up in a segregated, at the time, our system was Division I and Division II. So I was brought up in Division II, but I got an education. And when integration came about, the schools, I just felt that some of the teachers that were in those schools, some of the white teachers that were in those schools, rejected teaching black children. And a lot of the white children's parents were just like me. They took their children out. They didn't want to be with you. And they took their children out. And the black teachers that were there in our schools that had been good teachers with us, they were ready to retire, some of them, and some of them didn't want to be bothered with the white kids either. And so I just said, I thought that the Catholic education would be the best thing.
I started teaching in D.C. at 66, but it was okay. When I first started, it was fine. But I would say after I had been here maybe 15, 20 years, I noticed things started changing. My children did not. It wasn't because of the teachers. I have always thought D.C. has some of the best teachers in the country. But I knew some of these children that were in school were very difficult to discipline. Teachers had to spend so much time disciplining the children. So my children went to Burgundy Farm Country Day School, from there to Georgetown Day, only because I was not pleased with the way children behaved in the classroom.
My older siblings were sent through DC public schools the whole way. I don't know, although my parents were members of St. Francis Catholic Church, I'm not entirely sure why we weren't sent there initially. I think I was told, or I absorbed the fact that, like, St. Francis was very crowded, the class size was too big. I don't know, but I wound up at Randall Highlands, and I liked it. I thought.
Were the classes crowded because there just simply weren't enough schools, or was there some sort of population growth?
I assumed it's just like being a baby boomer. I don't know. It was, the population was up. We had old buildings. This was certainly after Brown versus Board, so you know that there used to be in the same neighborhood the black elementary and the white elementary. Well, now it was mixed, but I don't know. In this particular area, I guess it was just the higher population, and like 33 kids per class was kind of the norm.
My question, and this is where Susan, I'd love if you could give any comment here, because it was really unique to have someone who was a child going through this and talking about the school system during integration. So I would love if all of you could sort of weigh in, because I know there was some commentary about neighborhood schools and the schools making the transition in that period at the Brown versus Board of Education, and we're not seeing the racial mix for the first time, and just what was happening at the time, and your thoughts on sort of where the school system has evolved to now.
just want to say that when I moved into the community, Dorothy Jeffries was the principal at Randall Highlands. And the community got behind Tony Jones, who passed, who was the principal who came in and took her place. But it was never heard of. We picked him as principal of Randall Highlands. At that particular time, the mayor for life, Marion, was chair of the school board, and Virginia Mars was our school board representative for Ward 7. But the parents worked very hard. Whatever the teachers wanted, we saw to it that they got. We stood with our teachers. Now, Randall Highlands, it was, like they say, it was an old school. It was a hand-me-down school, really. Now, across the street was a private school, right on the corner there. And when I moved into the community, because both of my husband and I were working, so we tried to put our daughter in that private school, but they did not accept black children, or Negro children. It was a private school.
Randall Highlands Private School on Pennsylvania Avenue?
Yes, right on that corner.
Where the children's center is now.
Right, that's where it was. So my daughter went to Burgundy Farms also. And we had a bus that used to come through the community and pick them up and take them to Burgundy. But she went to Berry first. But if you go back in the history, a lot of us were educators. And so we sued Berry because we found that they were not given the kind of education that we were paying for. So what we did, we put our money in escrow. We went to court. We won that suit. And it was an article written, if you go back in the old papers of the Washington Post, there was an article written about what we did as parents. And we had good black teachers. Our teachers, in the summers, they would go to New York and other places and get their degrees. Believe it or not, I came up under the segregated system. I went to Morgan Elementary School, and I even have taken issue with what they call Adams Morgan, because when I lived in that community, Morgan was elementary school and Adams was an elementary school. We used to play on the hill where the Washington Hilton is. Now, we had good principals. As a matter of fact, one of the judges, his godmother, Turk Thompson, she was a principal, Josephine C. Smith of Morgan Elementary School. We have seen a lot of changes as far as education is concerned. My son also, I sent him to Capitol Hill Dayton, which was on up there on Constitution Avenue. But he wanted to go to school with his kids in the neighborhood, so then I transferred him to Randall Highlands. But one thing I must say is that we as parents, we saw that our children got quality and good education. And as I stated, whatever the teachers needed, we were there for them. We even had one time, we blocked the entrance of the school because they were going to bring the animals in there. And we said no, we weren't going to have it. And they called the police, but the police did not arrest us. But we were activist parents in this community, and we made sure that our children got good education. That's why they were able to get into some of the historical black colleges, as well as some of the, Ivy League schools and so forth. And that's one of the problems that I have now with the system. and is that we have our children who have gone and so forth, but when they start to look for people to run the city, they don't look at our children.
And actually, I do have one quick question before I'll let Susan answer that. And I do want to ask, like, I know you went to Miners Teachers College. I think you were an educator as well. Miss Anina Hammond was the principal. She couldn't join us, but Angela's here, her daughter. And several others were teachers. Dr. Baldwin went into the military and expressly said in his interview that he did not want to be a teacher, and that's why he went into the military. Can you ladies share about why? I mean, that's a lot of educators and a lot of people who attended Miners. Just about the prevalence of teachers and African-American teachers at that time. Like,
that was one of the respected, and just everybody, became teachers.
Was it a respected thing that women were respected? Were women sort of pushed into that more so than men?
I would say mostly women, because I remember at one time I was very good in math, and I wanted to be a math teacher, but it was something that was not prevalent for a woman to be a math teacher back in those days. But
my dad was a math teacher.
He was a male.
I think he was.
I know he was, because he went to school with my husband. Paul did.
Next, I'm going to let Susan speak about her experiences.
Okay, and Randall Highlands. So I came through Randall Highlands earlier than the period you're talking about, a little bit earlier. I was in a transition period. And thank you for reminding me about Miss Jeffries. It was good and bad. I mean, the transition period of the mid-60s. When I entered the school, probably, kindergarten or something, was majority white. My older sister and brother were still in the school. By the time I made it through 6th grade, it was majority black. My younger siblings in the school were the only white kids in their class. It was really a period of transition, but also, I guess quality-wise, I had white teachers, kindergarten, first, second, to say teacher. In 4th and 5th grade, I had black teachers. They were young black women who were really good teachers. I think they were the first black teachers in that school. I don't know, they were first black teachers I was aware of. Ms. Jeffries came in, I guess it was in 5th or 6th grade, maybe the first black teacher, principal in that school. The principals were shared between Orr and Randall Highlands. Class sizes were huge. We only had one old 1911 building. They had classrooms in the basement. By the time I got to 6th grade, they shipped out the other 6th grade class to the Methodist Church. And I also mentioned to you, Paul, that during this period in the 60s, again, this is from a kid's perspective, but the way I understood it was that they got rid of the track system in public schools. So that meant that, the classes that there was usually an A and B class. I found this out kind of later that, the kids that I was in 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade with, were the same kids all along, and then there was the other class. There were usually 2 classes per grade, and that remained the same when there was this disruption, and I suppose it's when you're talking about Barry being on the school board and so forth. They abolished that. They threw all the kids together. Were suddenly, and that happened around 6th grade. And there was just a combination of bad things that happened. Like, we got put out in demountables. We had demountables. They when we were off-site, chaos could break out. We were way far away from the principal's office, and nobody could hear you screaming. It's like, And we were with, I was in class with kids that had failed 3 times, so they were 3 years older than me, and I was a shrimp, so I was threatened. But anyway, it was a transition period. It was, I have good memories about much of it. I have other memories of why did that happen? And again, if I had hung in there a few more years, I think I would have appreciated all the things you were talking about. It was that time. Oh yes, they did. That's true. I actually knew where a lot of teachers lived. A lot of my teachers lived.
Did that make this a little hard? Like you have to avoid their homes?
Oh, you mean for no, I mean they would
knock on the door and
no, not they didn't live that close, but I do remember being thrilled when I got to go visit a teacher's house because I could talk there.
I am going to show one more clip and then I'm going to open it up the floor for questions. And who doesn't like a love story? Let's hit it twice. Would you ever consider leaving the community? One of the things all of our people in our cohort had in common was very long marriages. So here's a little montage of how they met.
This is a neighborhood of long marriages. I believe the Prutons are having their 50th anniversary next week. And just everybody here, Faye and Mac next door, are married. I don't know. They were married when they came here, and it's almost 30 years. And people just stay married.
My wife and I were from same little town. I met her. Started dating her in high school.
Well, I actually met Rudy when I was in a graduate class at University of Maryland.
I met her on the tennis court.
Dad used to joke and said she met me on the tennis court and never hit another ball.
I got married in 1959.
I got married in 1953.
I was married at 65.
We were married 53 years when he died.
Look at
We've
this.
been together how many years?
60.
I was married for 53 years.
He didn't think we'd be together 60 years, did he?
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah.
No, we did.
Yes, we did. You want to cut it short?
I mean, you just really don't think about it. You
Yeah,
just,
I know you don't think about it. I never thought about it until he asked the question.
Tell them how to make it all work out.
Right. It's a give and take situation. And in our day, they gave more than we took. And I think that, because I was married 56 years, almost 57 years. And like I said, it was a give and take situation. And nothing runs smooth in anything. There's a give and take situation. And what you do is you talk about it. And one thing you do, you just don't say angry about anything. We all make mistakes. So you just clean it up, that's all. And Pat and Bert and I, we did a lot of traveling together, didn't we, Pat?
Where'd you all go?
Oh, God. We went to the Panama Canal, right? We went to Hawaii. Yes. Jamaica. Virgin Islands. We just traveled a lot.
Your husbands were with you, correct?
Of course. They paid the bills.
Okay.
Yes.
And from there,
Hong Kong.
went to where?
Hong Kong. And China. That's right. We went to China, but we went to Hong Kong. Yes. As a matter of fact, we were in, where were we? In Hawaii when we met the neighbor here. Yes.
Which neighbor was that?
Hawkins.
Richard Hawkins?
Yes.
You met him in Hawaii?
I knew him from here.
Because he lived right up
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. But we didn't anticipate seeing them in Hawaii. But we ran into them while we were visiting in Hawaii.
The moral to the story is Penn Branch reaches all around the world.
Worldwide.
We're small at heart, but global in reach. So, with that, I'm going to open up the floor for questions.
Thank you for putting this whole presentation together, and thank you for sharing the history of the neighborhood. It gives a great appreciation, and I guess as a Washingtonian myself, and this neighborhood for my mother was like her dream. As a single parent, she felt she could not afford this area, but she was able to afford a house to raise us in off of Texas Avenue and F Street. And when I got married, and when my husband and I took the time to look across the city for a home, I kept saying to him, we must live in Penn Branch. There's no other location in the city. Penn Branch, Hillcrest, as everyone, as a Washingtonian know, is the best kept secret. They will make it seem like it's a lot of crime in this area, make it seem like the property value isn't worth. But this end of town had the greatest land because it had so many forts and other riches of land. We took 2 years looking for a house. Came through the neighborhood, there was not a house for sale. It wasn't until like 2007, there was a house being built on the hill. And we drove by and I was like, who would be crazy enough to buy a house at the top of the hill? And my husband was like, yeah. So we kept going through. We ended up off of Rhode Island Avenue to only find when the market crashed. There were a few houses that were still upside down in price. That was, to me, overpriced. We came back to Penn Branch to look to Hillcrest. And the relative said, I have a home for you. You just have to have an open mind. When we pulled up to the home, and it was the house on the hill, we looked at each other and was like, you've got to be kidding. And my husband said, remember what you said, who would be crazy enough to buy the house on the hill? Well, it ended up being the O'Neills. One of my main reasons for coming to Penn Branch to Hillcrest was Ann Beers Elementary, because I was a product for a short time of Ann Beers. But listening to some of the stories, there was a lot going on with the education system. If you were not in bound, and if they found out that you were out of bounds, they sent you to your boundary school, which at the time my boundary school was Boer Elementary. So my question to you is, how did Boer Elementary and how did Ann Beers become a part of the school system? And even listening to the track system, which the part of the track education system that I have learned about was through watching the documentary Waiting for Superman. And some of the stories shared, and even the transition in schools, it still very much had an impact when we came to the neighborhood, in which it was a disappointment in terms of education when I learned Ann Beers was no longer considered a gifted Italian school, when I learned that Ann Beers did not have all the resources that it once had when I attended Ann Beers, and even Boer Elementary, which ended up being the elementary I graduated from, and Principal Boone, and that the school is now named after, did a phenomenal job. But my question to you is, how did Boer Elementary, Ann Beers, and then Randall Highland still, as a part of the community schools, how did that come about?
The only thing that I could tell you was that Randall Highlands and Orr, the principal at Randall Highlands was also the principal at Orr. Now, Orr was like a secondary school. Am I right? Stays there, but most of the time was, but Ann Beers was a school. And see, believe it or not, Randall Highlands at one time, it was on track with Beers as far as the schools were concerned. Because a lot of the young people that left Randall Highlands, some of them are still in this community. They went to the Ivy League schools. There's some doctors, certified public accountants in this community. These are children that were products of Randall Highlands. Now, I can't tell you too much about Beers, but we had teachers that taught, that lived on Carpenter Street, that were part of Andeers. And a lot of our teachers lived in this community, you know, on Highwood Drive. And also there were teachers. But most of our teachers still lived in this community. They worked in this community. And believe it or not, a lot of people did not realize, but our teachers, they were dynamite teachers at Randall Highlands. I can't tell you too much about Beers because Beers was out of my community where we would go and send our children. But we've had, for example, one of the young ladies, her father was a doctor, Dr. Rose. She became a doctor. She went to Randall Highlands, that whole family. But we had some good teachers, and there was on Carpenter Street and Highwood Drive, a lot of our teachers. And some of them even taught at Beers. But Orr, I can't tell you too much about Orr because Orr was back over there. And like I say, the principal at Randall Highlands used to spend part of the time over at Orr. Those are the three. You can always hear more about Orr. No, not
really. All I knew is that our principal, Miss Deany, and then Miss Jeffries, was the principal of both schools. But that doesn't mean we had anything to do with each other. We never went there for assemblies. We didn't know anything about them. And it just astounds me to this day why they couldn't have a principal for each school, but it was different times. I will also say briefly, that at the time I was going to public school, yes, we had boundaries. We had to go to school in the boundaries. Classrooms were crowded. You know, they weren't going to take anybody from elsewhere. By the time my son went to public school, I was in a different position than my parents. I could drive. My mother wasn't driving. I didn't have a house full of kids. I was better able to. I could make other choices that my parents couldn't make. My son was in a Montessori program in DC Public Schools. There were specials, there were teachers in every school that taught the special subjects instead of one circuit rider teacher that went around the whole city to teach art and music and whatever in schools like once a month. And science, you know, it was an occasional thing. So anyway, in general, the system got a whole lot better. We had choices. Enterprising parents could apply to send their kids to not only charter schools, but special program schools. So, you know, we all do what we have to do. But in general, as a parent of public school child, things got better, and I hope they're still getting better.
Any other questions?
We've got a different topic, but why don't we have a metro station? Metro access.
Metro.
Yeah, I've been over here a long time, and that's one of the things that frustrated me in this neighborhood is not good metro access. So I'm wondering, is there a history behind that when they were putting in the metro system?
Nobody wanted a metro station to cut through this area because I don't know. Do you remember the time we had two bus lines?
The
And yes, and
DC Transit.
that's right. That's what ran out here.
Yellow and the green.
That's right. And I think it went to what, Bradbury Heights, was
I
it?
don't know. The WMNA was the Washington, Maryland line.
Right,
That went
and it
across the
went
line.
Pennsylvania Avenue.
And
Yeah, but the people did not want at that particular time. You know, the same way that's what happened over in River Terrace. The people did not want to cut through that community. And that's why you got this thing that's overhead and comes down over there near the stadium. But we all went to a lot of those meetings. But people just did not want that kind of thing in their community. That was the thinking at that particular time.
What was the reason why people didn't want metro access over here?
You mean the subway?
Right, yeah, like subway, right.
Well, they just didn't want to disrupt the community because they would have to have taken some of the homes. I sat on the Pennsylvania Avenue Task Force also. Now, what they put out there, and that's why I don't go to a lot of meetings now because I'm discussing with the district government. We had 3 lanes on Pennsylvania Avenue that brought traffic in the mornings, and we had 3 lanes that took them out. And I will never forget, Karina Ricks, Paul Savage, and Don Maury were part of that task force. And then Yvonne Moore and I became. They had already predetermined that they were going to put that divider from Sousa Bridge all the way out to Southern Avenue. They did not consult with the community. And the next thing happened, I would never have agreed that those folk could not come up and get into their driveways. I wouldn't do that to anybody. But this is what they did. That's why I don't go to a lot of community meetings now, because when they come out here, they have predetermined what they're going to do for us.
Next question.
I wanted to hear from, I know we heard from one newer neighbor who purchased a home here. I wanted to hear from some newer neighbors why they decided to come to Penn Branch.
Excellent question.
And just a shout out to some of the graduates in the area that went to public school. Anacostia, Spangler, Baloo, Wellington, Woodrow Wilson, Penn Branch neighbors. Why did you all decide to come, new people? I want to hear from new people.
So we're in the back. My name is Sterling. This is my wife, Gabriella. This is our baby, Tatiana. And we've been living here about a little bit over a year. And I think one of the most, well, again, it's like a big secret. I lived a little bit before the bridge on Capitol Hill earlier, in like a shoebox of an apartment, a shoebox literally. So I think the first thing we're looking for is like a single family home. And secondly, it's a sense of community. I'm originally from Louisiana, my wife is from Maryland, and we've always brought around communities that care for each other. So one of the big things when we came here is we felt it immediately, like people were coming up to our door and welcoming us, which was just different, you know, living in DC. And I think that just kind of struck us like we made the right decision. We live on Texas Avenue, 3540, and we took like 2 steps in our house and we said, this is it. And like didn't look at any other homes, we were just like kind of lucky God bless us somehow. So I think the community has just been great, and it's great to kind of finally see everybody and meet everybody. And yeah.
Welcome. You're the best community in the nation's capital.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Morgan. My wife and I moved here in 2016. We actually found a neighborhood. Our child actually was going to the daycare up there, and then everyone who's been back here understand that the traffic along Pennsylvania Avenue is extremely bad. So we actually made a detour. We drove back to this magical space. We came through. We came out. And I told my wife, I said, we're going to live in that space. Because it was just so magical. You had these yards. You had Paul Grant walking his dog, even at that point. You got Tracy Grant. You could feel the love. And it has not disappointed. This is a magical place filled with a lot of wonderful people, wonderful stories here. So we knew then, and we know now, that we actually made the right choice. We had to stalk the neighborhood for 2 years. I saw signs go up with the family here, with the Edisons. We went down quickly. Saw John and Marie's house go up. Sign go up, went down quickly. And I told my wife, I said, we need to make a decision quickly because we were moving slowly. So we eventually made that decision, and we have been thankful and blessed ever since. So that's how we got to Penn Branch.
Welcome.
I, like myself, I moved in the neighborhood in 2016. I'm a native Washingtonian. I grew up in the Anacostia neighborhood. And I knew about this neighborhood when I was a kid. I mean, believe it or not, I used to come trick-or-treating in this neighborhood. We knew they had teachers, doctors, lawyers. We knew you got the best candy in this part of town. I told Chris this story. True story. So I live right off of Good Hope Road in that area. So all my buddies would come over here. So I knew one day that I wanted to come over here. So one day the wife and I, we were in Tokyo. And we were always looking, we moved the family to Fort Washington, Maryland. But, we moved around because of my job and all that. So we were overseas and all that. So I was in the Middle East and my family was in Tokyo. So my wife, called me. She said, hey, I see a house, on Carpenter. I knew the neighborhood. I said, really? I'm like, okay, well, we're not there. So I told my sister to come check it out. And it was Miss Brown's house. She had an open house on Mother's Day. And my sister came over there, our realtor came over here, checked it out. She said, hey, this is a good one. I said, okay, well, put a full price offer in. And as Chris says, it was down, it was up Sunday, it was down Monday. And that's how we came into the neighborhood. And we never regretted it ever since.
Welcome.
Hey, hi everybody. My name is Cynthia. How are you? This is my daughter Maya and the peach sugar. Last July, so we got here. I work in the community. I do home physical therapy. It's Paul. One of the reasons why I'm here. I remember the first time I came to this community, it's like, God, this is gorgeous. I had no idea there was anything like this in DC. And I was like, I wish I could live here. I want to live here. It felt warm, people knew each other. And when I was ready, every house I had a patient in, I would ask, do you know if there's a house for sale? Do you know any neighbors that are selling a house? I beat that pavement until I crossed the vertical. And she told me that I needed to contact one of our neighbors, Jake, who was a realtor in the neighborhood. He could probably get me a house. So I harassed him 5 months until he found me a house. And it was the best decision I made. I feel like I won the neighborhood lottery. I mean, there are kids in the Highwood on the cul-de-sac. And there are kids right across the street. There are kids everywhere. We just have to walk down the street if we want friends, and we have people to play with, so I feel blessed.
Awesome. We feel blessed to have you. Yeah. She was my mommy's physical therapist. Oh, we need a call. Period. She's the best physical therapist in the world. My mother loved her. And she said, take care of her. So I called Jake. Jake, get the girl a house. And he did. I'd like to share how I moved here in 1986. The owners of my property, which is right behind you, had an outlandish price on the property. And back then, $400,000 in '86 was a lot of money. And
we walked in and sat down and talked with him, and I put my non-licensed engineering hat on and told him of all of the flaws in the property. And he said, he looked at his wife, they were Italian, they were a beautiful couple. They said to me, you're that smart, we're smart enough not to fight you. We reduced the price to $200,000 in 1986. They were good neighbors. And the neighbors beside me were beautiful. They were a white couple. Henry used to weed and feed my lawn, his lawn, because he said we wanted all to look the same. He did that for 8 years, and I felt guilty. And then in the interim, Pat told me I needed flowers. Pat Q Hall. And so Pat gave me bulbs out of her garden. My garden that you see today was built with flowers from her yard. Miss Brown, you see those pink flowers? They're all in my back. I didn't go to the grocery store. My neighbors built the beautiful landscape that I had. Yes, across the street. I just want to say, I've always loved this neighborhood from the day we moved in. Every time a house goes on the market, I do a prayer, and y'all all should, that it be sold to beautiful people like you, families. We have lost that in America. Families, communities. So please know your neighbor. The most important thing I can leave you with today is know your neighbors. I know my neighbors. 3700 block, 3800 block of Carpenter. I know my neighbors. Get out and walk. Stop a neighbor who's walking that dog. Hey, what's your name? What you do? Because at the end of the day, you don't know what they do. We got lawyers, we got judges, teachers, thinkers, financial planners. We got everything up in here. Communities grow by leaving the income and knowledge within its boundaries. So if you don't know your neighbors at the end of today, come knock on 3721 Copy, and I will hook you up.